Thanks for tuning in to the Urban School Podcast. I'm back with more hip hop news, a hip hop topic, a hip hop debate that a lot of people probably already had already, but I wanted to put my spin on the debate. So I haven't covered any Drake topics in a while, and I've been kind of down on Drake after, his response to the Kendrick Lamar beef and the lawsuit and just the petty nature that he has. But we've always had the petty or heard the petty nature in his music, but it started to come to real life. So, as they say, art imitates life and vice versa. So he was really starting to be a lot petty and started to be, just be a sore loser and things like that. He was coming off as. So I really didn't cover his topics much. He was one of my favorite artists before this battle with Kendrick Lamar and all this aftermath stuff. And even during the beef, he was still one of my favorite artists of all time. But just the pettiness and everything behind it, it just didn't feel like a hip hop move. Didn't feel like it felt like a very sore loserish sour grapes, whatever you want to call it. And it just really just deterred me from his music and just discussing topics in regards to him. So um, it seems like he's a little bit back on track as far as getting ready to petty stuff. But as far as his music is undeniable with the catalog he had, especially with the first 6 albums or so. But nevertheless, he's still a great artist who provided us a lot of great music and a lot of great times as far as in relations to to that music. So I still want to pay some kind of homage to him. So uh, thinking earlier, I was thinking about the best albums that he had in order, or try to put some kind of chronological greatness to it as far as his albums go. Now he has a lot of great albums. Now he has only officially 8 solo projects, studio projects, and of course those collaboration albums with Future and 21 Savage and Party Next Door, those are not included in my rankings. The album, if you're reading this, it's too late. It's considered a mixtape, so I didn't put that one in there either. But it's difficult for me to rate that one, especially with the other ones, because it's such different material. It was a lot of exclusive rap that he wasn't doing a lot of singing on that record, well, on that album or mixtape, they should say. It's difficult to determine what's a mixtape and an album nowadays, because back in the days it was very clear um, what was a mixtape and what's an album. But nevertheless, I was able to rank these 8 albums, and I rank them basically solely on content, replay value, and then just having per hits. So without further ado, I'll get into my 8 albums from Drake ranked. And of course, number 8 is Honestly Nevermind. This album was mostly, house music. It had a couple songs that I like, but for the most part, he was trying something new, venturing off, which I never penalize an artist or blame an artist for trying to try something new, because we don't want to hear the same thing all the time. And it's about evolution. You're going to change, your sound is going to change. But this album went too far left and I didn't really, jam with it. So this would was have to be my worst album ever from Drake. Not saying it's a bad album, but it's his worst one. I just wasn't a fan of it. Number 7, Certified Lover Boy. So Certified Lover Boy was starting that trend where Drake is starting to cater to more of a younger audience. He's starting to collaborate with younger artists. And then he was trying to cater to their audience as well. So a lot of music that he was putting out isn't the same as he was before. He was getting away from his purism of the hip hop that he initially put out with the So Far Gone and um, the mixtapes that he used to put out when he was still trying to get signed and things like that, like Comeback Season albums, mixtapes like that. But he was trying to reach too many demos, and it was just a lot of young music that I just didn't vibe with at the time. So, like I said before, with the Honestly Nevermind, it's not a bad album. It's just one of his worst ones. Scorpion at number 6 had a lot of good songs, but a lot of misses, and there was a lot of music that he put out on this album that I feel like he was trying to do an R&B song here, do a rap song here, and there was a lot of that Happy Ratchet Birthday song that I didn't like. That kind of threw me off. I didn't even love the uh, Kiki Do You Love Me song as much. It was kind of, it was kind of popular and they had a dance with it, so it was kind of stylish. But for the most part, he was getting away from who he really is or who he started off and showed us who he was. But Scorpion wasn't a bad album. I like the song that he had with Michael Jackson in there, a very good song. But, it was a lot of music that went in a lot of different ways. It wasn't a cohesive project, is one of the reasons I didn't like it as much. But nevertheless, still had some great music. The fifth album, For Other Dogs. Now, I believe this album faced a lot of scrutiny because, once again, he had a lot of young tracks on it and a lot of tracks that was catered to young people, and he didn't make music for his core fan base. Now, this album too faced a lot of scrutiny because this was around the time people started seeing him in a decline, so a lot of people was expecting a lot of rap, and he gave a lot of soft songs, but a lot of great music was on this album. The the intro, one of the I think the intro for this album is one of my favorite intros of all time from Drake, and I love the intro, especially with the Frank Ocean sample from Wise Man. um, I love that song even before he sampled it. It was on the Southpaw at the end of the Southpaw movie, I remember. But nevertheless, a lot of great music on this album, but it was a lot of bitterness as well. So he was kind of foreshadowing the bitterness that he would eventually come to, addressing a lot of people, whether it be Serena or Rihanna or ASAP Rocky, and a lot of people he had beef with that who he knew wouldn't come back at him. So that's another reason this album faced a lot of scrutiny, but it was a lot of songs that didn't fit collectively, and um, and it had a lot of bitter lyrics. So a lot of people despised this album, but I put this album in the middle of his albums. Number four, Nothing Was the Same. Very melodic and R&B eccentric album. He had some tracks on it. But there's a lot of somber music and a lot of great production as well. But, this album was starting to see when you start to see a change of the guards for Drake, where he started to go more R&B eccentric and started to go younger with his music, even though he was young at the time. But you could tell he started to get more of a fan base. So as he got this fan base, he felt he had to cater to him towards more demos, which makes sense because, you starting to cross over. You can't just make the gangster rap that you used to make, things that he used to make on Take Care and stuff like that, because that might have been his most purest hip hop form for an album. But this album, where you start to see him start to shift over and start to realize, hey, I'm a big star now. I have to, make more pop music, and I have to make more music for the radio so I can get that play and continue to grow as an artist, which I can't really fault him for. Three, as I talked about before, is Take Care. This is the most heavy rap influence. It felt like he really catered into his Memphis roots, where his father is from, and he had mentions of Yo Gotti and talking about being in the South and things like that. He had a Stevie Wonder playing the harmonica on one of the songs, and he had the song with the lady from Canada. I can't recall her name, but it was the song where Over My Dead Body, which was one of his great songs as well. This was a great album, especially if you're a fan of Drake the Rapper. Drake the Rapper on this album was elite, but it was right before, this was like in his prime years before he got all the fame and acclaim, and before he realized, hey, I need to, you know, start singing more and getting on the radio and make these appearances and make become this household name. So this was Drake at his purest form. Two, Take Thank Me Later. So his debut album, a lot of great classic collabs, especially the song he had with Alicia Keys, the song he had with Jeezy with the Aaliyah sample. He had a lot of great music on this album. Of course, it's his solo debut album, and as I always tell you, the debut album, if you don't like the debut album, you probably won't like the rest of their music because it took their whole life to make their solo album. So they have fresh ideas, fresh looks at things. A lot of production goes in, a lot of things like that. It's just a stellar time. But this album gave you a great mix of his singing ability and rapping ability, and a great introduction to him for people who didn't know him beforehand. So two is Thank Me Later, and number one, of course, by choice of elimination, process of elimination, Views. Now, Views faced a lot of scrutiny at first when it came out as well, because it felt like it was going all over the place. It wasn't too cohesive. A lot of people felt. But this album has the most replay value, in my opinion, for a Drake album. It is a lot of singing on it. There's a lot of somberness, but as far as a collective piece of work and the songs and the production being so well fit together, this album made the most sense. Now, um, these songs were songs that define a lifetime, and that's kind of my criteria for rating great albums if they can define a lifetime. And I do remember exactly where I was when I was hearing this album, watching the NBA playoffs and things like that, watching the Toronto Raptors, which he makes mention of in this album. He also make mentions of, Kevin Durant when he was on Oklahoma City Thunder, the great days when he used to play with Russell Westbrook and Serge Ibaka and Kendrick Perkins and all these guys. So he made a lot of mentions to like basketball references and things like that. But this album had the DMX sample. It had, you know, I Die For, the Non song. And it has so many great songs on this album that I think it's his best collection of work when you think about sonically and the way songs fit together. Having a project that sounds very similar and it's sort of themed. But Views was what probably his most humble and most, put together album. So that is my collection of Drake albums ranked from 8 to 1. Thanks for tuning into the content. And as always, I'll see you next time.